Imagine trying to solve the world's most complex puzzle with a completely different set of rules. That's essentially what happened when Donald Trump took on the war in Ukraine. Forget the traditional playbook, folks, because this story is about a policy that was as pragmatic as it was, well, let's just say distinctive. Let's unravel this fascinating narrative together, right here on Story-Driven English, The Art of the Deal, Ukraine Edition, starring Donald J. Trump. All right, folks, let's talk Ukraine. Not the borscht, though. That's pretty good, too. We're talking about the geopolitical hot potato that's been tossed around like a hot potato at a particularly tense family reunion. And who better to handle a hot potato than the master chef of deals himself, Donald J. Trump? Forget the stuffy, politically correct diplomats who tiptoe around issues like they're walking on eggshells, probably organic, free-range eggshells, mind you. Trump, he charges in like a bull in a china shop, except this china shop is stocked with Russian nesting dolls and nuclear launch codes. And somehow, he manages to rearrange the furniture without breaking everything. The mainstream media, bless their perpetually outraged hearts, would have you believe that Trump's approach to Ukraine was unconventional, chaotic even. They'd clutch their pearls and gasp. He's not following protocol. He's not playing by the rules. Well, guess what? The old rules weren't exactly winning any prizes. We'd been playing geopolitical chess with Russia for decades, and they were always 3 moves ahead, checkmating us with their sneaky little rooks and bishops, cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns. Trump, on the other hand, decided to flip the chessboard over, scatter the pieces, and invent a whole new game. Call it extreme geopolitical Jenga, the madman theory. The idea was to make your opponent think you were so unpredictable, so crazy, that they'd back down just to avoid provoking you. Well, Trump didn't need a theory. He is the madman theory, personified. But here's the genius part. It's not actual madness. It's strategic unpredictability. It's keeping everyone guessing. It's the art of the deal applied to international relations. Think about it. The traditional approach to dealing with a bully like Putin is to be all stern and formal, issue statements, and maybe impose some sanctions that everyone knows are full of loopholes. Putin just yawns and annexes another chunk of territory. Trump, he'd probably tweet something like, "Met with Little Rocket Man's buddy, Vlad. Great guy. Tremendous handshake. We talked about, stuff. Big stuff. The biggest knows. I'm not messing around. Hashtag MAGA. Hashtag peace through strength. Hashtag no more. Mr. Nice Guy." And you know what? Putin would probably think twice, because he wouldn't know what to expect. Is Trump going to send in the troops? Is he going to offer him a Trump Tower franchise in Moscow? Is he going to challenge him to a shirtless horseback riding competition? The uncertainty is the weapon. Sanctions, the carrot, and the very big stick no. Let's talk about the specifics. The media loves to portray Trump as being soft on Russia. He's Putin's puppet, they scream. But the reality is far more nuanced. Trump understood the power of economic leverage. He knew that sanctions could be a powerful tool, but only if used strategically. The Obama administration's approach to sanctions was like a leaky faucet, a constant drip, drip, of restrictions that Russia learned to live with. Trump, on the other hand, turned on the fire hose. He slapped on sanctions that were designed to hurt to make Russia feel the pain. But, and this is crucial, he also held out the possibility of lifting those sanctions. He dangled the carrot of economic relief in front of Russia, but only if they played ball. It was like saying, "Hey, Vlad, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice. But if you choose the hard way, it's going to be very hard. This isn't weakness. It's negotiation. It's the art of the deal. You don't get what you want by making empty threats. You get it by creating a situation where the other side has a strong incentive to give you what you want. Ukraine, the pawn, the player, or the prize." And what about Ukraine, the country caught in the middle of this geopolitical tug-of-war? The media likes to portray Ukraine as a helpless victim, a pawn in a great power game. And to some extent, that's true. But Trump saw Ukraine as something more, a potential player. He understood that Ukraine had its own agency, its own interests. He wasn't going to treat them like a charity case, handing out aid with no strings attached. He was going to say, "Look, we're willing to help you, but you need to help yourselves. You need to clean up your corruption. You need to get serious about reforms." and you need to be willing to negotiate with Russia. This might sound harsh, but it's actually respectful. It's treating Ukraine like a grown-up, capable of making its own decisions. It's saying, we're not going to dictate your future. We're going to help you create a future where you can stand on your own 2 feet. The aid Trump did offer wasn't just a blank check. It was tied to specific goals, to demonstrable progress. He used the aid as leverage, the same that was used for Russia. It was a tool to encourage Ukraine to get its act together and to engage in meaningful negotiations. This, the critics cried, was quid pro quo, as if international relations weren't a constant series of quid pro quos. Every deal, every agreement, involves some kind of exchange. Trump just made it explicit. He cut through the diplomatic doublespeak and got straight to the point. The America First doctrine, not isolationism, but strategic realignment now. Let's address the elephant in the room. The America First doctrine. The media loves to paint this as isolationism, as Trump pulling up the drawbridge and retreating from the world. But that's a gross mischaracterization. America First is not about abandoning our allies or ignoring global problems. It's about prioritizing American interests and ensuring that our foreign policy serves the needs of the American people. It's about being smart, strategic, and yes, a little bit selfish. In the context of Ukraine, America First meant asking some tough questions. What's in it for us? How does this conflict affect American security and prosperity? Are we getting a good return on our investment? This doesn't mean we don't care about Ukraine. It means we're not going to blindly pour resources into a conflict without a clear strategy and a defined endpoint. It means we're going to be pragmatic, not idealistic. Trump understood that the United States couldn't be the world's policeman, solving every problem and fighting every war. He knew that we needed to focus on our own challenges, on rebuilding our economy, strengthening our borders, and restoring our standing in the world. And ironically, a stronger America is better for the world. A strong, prosperous, and confident America is a more effective partner, a more reliable ally, and a more powerful force for good. The results, judge for yourself. But don't listen to the media. So, what were the results of Trump's Ukraine policy? The media will tell you it was a disaster. But the media also told you that Trump would start World War III on his first day in office. They've been wrong about pretty much everything. So why start believing them now? The truth is, Trump's approach to Ukraine was a work in progress. It was unconventional, unpredictable, and often controversial. But it was also a bold attempt to break the stalemate, to find a new way forward. He was shaking up the system, and no system likes to be shook. Did he achieve all his goals? No. Did he make mistakes? Of course. But he also achieved some significant things. He put Russia on notice. He made it clear that the United States would not tolerate further aggression. He strengthened Ukraine's position. He provided them with military aid and political support, while also pushing them to reform. He opened up a dialogue with Russia. He kept the lines of communication open, even while applying pressure. He didn't start a war, and perhaps most importantly, he challenged the conventional wisdom of the foreign policy establishment. He showed that there was another way, a different approach, a more American approach. The legacy, a new playbook for a new era. Trump's Ukraine policy may not be remembered as a textbook example of diplomatic finesse. It was messy, it was chaotic, it was Trumpian, but it was also a reflection of a changing world, a world where the old rules no longer apply. It was a recognition that the United States needs to be more strategic, more pragmatic, and more assertive in its foreign policy. It was a rejection of the status quo, a willingness to challenge the conventional wisdom, and a commitment to putting American interests first, whether you love him or hate him. You have to admit, Donald J. Trump changed the game, and his approach to Ukraine, like it or not, may well be a blueprint for a new era of American foreign policy. It's a playbook that says, we're not going to play by your rules. We're going to play by our rules, and we're going to win. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what the world needs. A little bit of unpredictability, a little bit of disruption, and a whole lot of America first. Because a strong America, a truly strong America, is the best hope for a peaceful and prosperous world. Even if it means flipping a few chessboards along the way. And maybe, just maybe, having a president who's not afraid to say what everyone else is thinking is a good thing. After all, who wants a leader who plays it safe when the stakes are this high? Give me the guy who's willing to roll the dice, to shake things up, to make the deal. Give me the guy who's not afraid to be the madman in the room. Give me Trump. Okay, let's break down these core principles of Trump's Ukraine policy, as presented in the text, and rephrase them in a similar style to the previous story format. Light, humorous, pro-Trump, but with insightful analysis. Trump's Ukraine playbook. The core principles, because winning isn't everything. It's the only thing, all right. So we've established that Trump wasn't playing by the old dusty rulebook when it came to Ukraine. He wasn't about to sit through endless, boring meetings, sipping lukewarm tea, and pretending to agree with people he probably couldn't stand. He had his own playbook, and it was filled with plays that would make Machiavelli blush and maybe even take notes. Here's the breakdown of the core principles. Trump style 3.1. Direct diplomacy. Talking to the big guy, because who else matters? Forget the underlings, the middle managers, the special envoys who spend more time on airplanes than actually achieving anything. Trump went straight to the top. He wanted to talk to Putin man-to-man, leader to leader, alpha-2-alpha dodge. The media, of course, had a collective aneurysm. He's legitimizing a dictator, they shrieked. He's breaking protocol. But Trump understood something they didn't. Sometimes the best way to get things done is to talk to the person in charge. It's like trying to get a refund at a store. Do you waste your time with the cashier? No, you ask to speak to the manager. Putin was the manager of Russia, and Trump wanted to have a word. These weren't just casual chats, mind you. These were strategic conversations. Trump was laying down the loth bureaucratic red tape and getting straight to the point. It showed strength, decisiveness, and a commitment to results, not just endless talking. It also perfectly aligned with the America First idea, putting the U.S. at the center of the negotiations, not hiding behind some international committee. This was about American leadership, bold and direct. 3.2. Economic leverage. Squeeze M till they squeal, but offer a way out. Trump wasn't afraid to use the economic might of the United States as a weapon. He was like the Godfather, making Russia an offer they couldn't refuse. Except instead of a horse's head, it was crippling sanctions. The beauty of Trump's approach was that it wasn't just about punishment. It was about incentives. He wasn't just turning off the money tap. He was holding out the possibility of turning it back on, but only if Russia behaved. Think of it like training a dog. You don't just scold the dog when it misbehaves. You also reward it when it does something right. Trump was basically saying to Putin, be a good boy and you'll get a treat. Be a bad boy and you'll get well. Well, you don't want to know. The sanctions weren't just random either. They were targeted. They went after the things that Russia cared about most: energy, finance, access to international markets. It was like squeezing a balloon. You apply pressure in the right places, and eventually something's got to give. And tightening sanctions on Russian energy payments. Genius hit M where it hurts. Their wallet analysis, the smart stuff, the sanctions, and asset freezes were presented as powerful tools, not just symbolic gestures. They were designed to create real leverage to force Russia to the negotiating table. The promise of easing sanctions was the carrot, the incentive for Russia to cooperate. This was about maximizing American power, using economic might to achieve diplomatic goals. It was hardball, but it was smart hardball. 3.3. Conditional support for Ukraine. No blank checks, because who does that? Trump wasn't about to write Ukraine a blank check and say, go fight Russia, we'll foot the bill. He was a businessman, not a charity. He wanted a return on his investment. This is where the conditional support came in. Trump was basically saying to Ukraine, we'll help you, but you need to help yourselves. You need to get your act together, stop being so corrupt, and start talking to Russia. The media screamed quid pro quo, impeachment. But Trump just shrugged. He knew that every deal involves some kind of exchange. There's no such thing as a free lunch, especially in international relations. The idea of pausing military aid and intelligence sharing, that was the stick. It was a way of saying, we're serious about this. You need to show us you're serious too. And the suggestion that Ukraine give the U.S. access to its mineral resources, pure Trump. It's like saying, we'll help you rebuild, but we're also going to make a little profit on the side. It's win-win, at least from an American perspective. Analysis, the smart stuff. Conditional support was presented as responsible and strategic. It wasn't about abandoning Ukraine. It was about ensuring that American aid was used effectively and that Ukraine was a willing partner in finding a solution. The mineral resource deal was framed as a mutually beneficial arrangement, aligning Ukraine's reconstruction with American economic interests. It was about getting the best possible deal for America, while also helping Ukraine. 3.4 America First Foreign Policy. Looking out for number one, because, this is the overarching principle that tied everything together. America First. Wasn't about isolationism. It was about prioritization. It was about making sure that American foreign policy served American interests. In the context of Ukraine, this meant asking, what's in it for us? How does this conflict affect American security and prosperity? Are we getting a good return on our investment? This doesn't mean Trump didn't care about Ukraine or about world peace. It means he wasn't going to sacrifice American interests on the altar of globalism. He was going to be pragmatic, not idealistic. The idea of reducing unprofitable global commitments and focusing on the Indo-Pacific region, that's just smart strategy. It's like a business focusing on its most profitable markets and cutting its losses. Analysis, the smart stuff, the America First framework, provided a justification for potentially controversial policies. It appealed to a segment of the population that prioritized domestic issues and believed in a more transactional approach to international relations. It was about being realistic, not naive about the world. It was about recognizing that America has its own interests, and it's the president's job to protect them. It reframed potential criticisms like being too harsh on Ukraine as strengths, being a strong negotiator and a shrewd steward of American resources. In conclusion, the Trumpian takeaway. Trump's Ukraine policy was a masterclass in deal-making. Applied to the world stage, it was bold, it was unconventional, and it was definitely not politically correct. But it was also rooted in a clear-eyed assessment of American interests and a willingness to use all the tools at his disposal: diplomacy, economic pressure, and even a little bit of strategic unpredictability to achieve his goals. He wasn't playing checkers. He was playing three-dimensional chess, and he was playing to win. And isn't that what you want in a leader? Someone who's going to fight for your interests, even if it means ruffling a few feathers along the way. The answer, my friends, is a resounding yes. #MAGA, okay. Let's really amplify the Trump's Ukraine playbook narrative, focusing on the justifications for the economic warfare, freezing assets and sanctions. We'll go longer, deeper, and even more. Trump's Ukraine playbook, the art of the financial Armageddon, or how to bankrupt your enemy without firing a single bullet. All right, folks, let's get down to brass tacks. We've talked about the charm offensive with a steel fist inside, the velvet glove, of course, the conditional handouts because nobody gets a free lunch, especially not from Trump, and the grand strategy of America First, because, let's face it, who else is going to look out for number one? Closing parenthesis, but now, we're getting to the real fireworks. We're talking about the economic equivalent of a nuclear strike, the weaponization of finance, the unleashing of sanctions so devastating they'd make Genghis Khan whimper. We're talking about turning Russia's financial system into a smoldering crater, all without firing a single bullet. The liberal media, those purveyors of fake news and perpetual outrage, went absolutely ballistic. They clutched their pearls, they gnashed their teeth. They shrieked about the sanctity of international law and the dangers of economic warfare. They sounded like a bunch of chickens squawking about the fox guarding the henhouse. But Trump, he just smiled that knowing smile. He knew something they didn't. He knew that in the real world, the only rule is to win. And he knew that sometimes the best way to win is to hit your opponent so hard, so fast, and so financially devastatingly that they don't even know what hit them. This wasn't just about being mean, folks. This was about being smart. This was about using every tool in the arsenal, and in the 21st century, the most powerful weapon isn't a missile. It's a swift code. The justifications, a symphony of economic destruction in four-part harmony. Let's break down the genius of Trump's economic assault on Russia. The four pillars of his financial Armageddon. 4.1. Economic pressure as the ultimate deterrent. The art of the financial kneecapping, no blood, just bankruptcies. Forget boots on the ground. Forget expensive military deployments that drain our treasury and risk American lives. Trump understood that in the modern age, wars are fought not just on battlefields, but in boardrooms and on trading floors. Freezing Russian assets and imposing sanctions was like performing a financial kneecapping. It crippled Russia's ability to wage war, to fund its propaganda machine, to project its power on the world stage. It was like cutting off the oxygen supply to a fire without fuel. It eventually sputters and dies. The media whined about collateral damage and the impact on the global economy, but Trump understood that sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And in this case, the omelet was a world where Russia was no longer a threat, where its expansionist ambitions were checked, and where America was once again the undisputed leader of the free world. And let's be clear, the pain these sanctions inflicted on Russia, that was intentional. That was the whole point. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was a full-body slam. Trump wanted Putin to feel it, to understand that his actions had consequences, that there was a price to be paid for defying the United States. He zeroed in on the energy payments, the lifeblood of the Russian economy, and squeezed hard. He was like a boa constrictor, slowly tightening its grip until its prey. Well, you get the picture. Analysis beyond the obvious. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about deterrence. It was about sending a message to Russia and to any other would-be aggressor that the United States was willing to use its economic power to defend its interests and to enforce the rules of the international order as defined by America. Of course, it was a demonstration of resolve, a show of force without the messiness. Of actual force, it was, in short, the ultimate power move. 4.2. Leverage for negotiations. The art of the deal. Russian addition, or how to get what you want without giving anything away. Trump, the master negotiator, understood that sanctions weren't just a weapon. They were also a bargaining chip. They were something he could offer to remove in exchange for concessions. It was like holding a gun to Russia's head, a financial gun, of course, and saying, okay, let's talk. The frozen assets, the blocked access to international finance, the crippled economy. These were all things that Russia desperately wanted back, and Trump was willing to give them back. If Russia played ball, this was the essence of the art of the deal. You create a situation where the other side is so desperate, so hurting, that they're willing to give you almost anything to make the pain stop. It's like negotiating with a hostage taker. You don't give them what they want until you get what you want. The media accused Trump of extortion and bullying, but Trump just saw it as good business. He was creating leverage, maximizing his bargaining power, and ensuring that the United States got the best possible deal. The possibility, just the mere hint, of lifting some sanctions was the golden carrot, dangling just out of reach. It was the key to unlocking a deal. On American terms. Analysis, the masterclass. This was about turning a weakness, Russia's economic vulnerability, into a strength American negotiating power. It was about using sanctions not just as a punishment, but as a tool to achieve a desired outcome. It was about being proactive, not reactive, about shaping the negotiations to America's advantage. It was pure, unadulterated Trumpian deal-making. On a global scale. 4.3, protecting American economic interests, making America great again, one sanction at a time, because winning isn't enough. We need to profit. Let's not kid ourselves. Trump wasn't just thinking about world peace and Ukrainian sovereignty. He was also thinking about the American economy, about American jobs, and about American energy independence. And he saw an opportunity in the Ukraine crisis. He saw a chance to not only punish Russia, but also to benefit the United States. Freezing Russian assets and imposing sanctions could open up new markets for American energy exports, reduce Europe's dependence on Russian gas, and weaken Russia's overall economic influence. It was like hitting Russia with a stick and picking up the gold that fell out of their pockets. The plan to sell more gas to Europe, that wasn't just about helping our allies, it was about boosting American energy companies, creating American jobs, and making America more energy independent. It was about turning a crisis into an opportunity. Analysis: the grand strategy. This was about aligning American foreign policy with American economic interests. It was about recognizing that economic power is a key component of national security, and that a strong American economy is essential for maintaining our global leadership. It was about being strategic, about seeing the bigger picture, and about using every tool at our disposal to advance American interests. It was America first, not just as a slogan, but as a guiding principle. 4.4. The morality of strength. Why being the bad guy can be a good thing sometimes. Let's face it, the world isn't a playground. It's a jungle. And in the jungle, the strong survive. Trump understood this. He knew that sometimes you have to be the bad guy to protect your interests and to maintain order. The media and the international community might wring their hands about the humanitarian consequences of sanctions. But Trump saw it differently. He saw it as a necessary evil, a way to prevent a larger, more destructive conflict. He was like the sheriff in an old Western movie, willing to use tough tactics to keep the peace. He wasn't afraid to be unpopular, to be criticized, to be seen as the bad guy, because he knew that sometimes being the bad guy is the only way to be the good guy. He chose the lesser evil. It was strength. In conclusion, the Trump doctrine in action. Trump's economic warfare against Russia was a masterclass in power politics. It was a demonstration of American economic might, a calculated use of leverage, and a ruthless pursuit of American interests. It was a rejection of the naive idealism of the past, and an embrace of a more pragmatic, more assertive approach to foreign policy. It was, in short, the Trump doctrine in action. Bold, unconventional, and unapologetically focused on winning. It was about making America great again. One sanction, one frozen asset, one bankrupted oligarch at a time. And whether you love it or hate it, you have to admit, it was a performance for the ages. It was a reminder that, in the game of nations, there are no prizes for second place. There's only winning and losing. And Donald J. Trump, he always plays to win. Okay, let's supercharge the Trump's Ukraine playbook section on the negotiated settlement, making it even longer, more detailed, and even more infused with that signature Trumpian style. Trump's Ukraine playbook, the art of the deal, endgame, peace through strength, and maybe a few concessions, because winning isn't pretty. It's just winning. All right, people, let's cut to the chase. We've covered the economic blitzkrieg, the diplomatic maneuvering, and the overall America First philosophy. But what's the end game? What's the goal? It's not endless war. It's not a stalemate. It's not some vague, wishy-washy peace process that drags on for decades and achieves absolutely nothing. The end game, folks, is peace. But not just any peace. We're talking about a Trumpian peace. A peace that's achieved through strength, through negotiation, and through a healthy dose of reality. A peace that benefits America, stabilizes the region, and yes, even gives Russia a face-saving way out, because even bullies need an exit strategy. The weak need liberals, the career diplomats, the experts who've been wrong about everything. For the past 50 years, they'll tell you it's impossible. They'll say that Russia will never negotiate, that Ukraine will never compromise, that peace is a pipe dream. They'll talk about international law and moral obligations, and all sorts of other things that have absolutely nothing to do with the real world. But Trump, he doesn't listen to the naysayers. He doesn't listen to the doubters. He doesn't listen to anyone who tells him something can't be done. He's a builder, a deal maker, a winner. And he knows that anything is possible if you're bold enough, tough enough, and smart enough to make it happen. So, how did Trump plan to achieve this seemingly impossible peace? Let's break down the master plan, the final act of the Trumpian drama. 5.1. Diplomacy. The real kind, not the fake kind, or how to talk to Putin without getting played. Forget the endless conferences, the pointless resolutions, the diplomatic doublespeak that goes nowhere. Trump wasn't interested in the theater of diplomacy. He was interested in the substance. He wanted to get down to business, to cut through the BS, and to talk directly to the people who mattered. And in this case, the person who mattered most was Vladimir Putin. The media went into meltdown mode. "He's meeting with a dictator," they screamed. "He's legitimizing a war criminal." They accused him of being a traitor, a Russian agent, a Manchurian candidate again. Closing parenthesis, but Trump understood something they didn't. You can't make peace with your friends, you have to make peace with your enemies. And to do that, you have to talk to them. You have to understand their motivations, their fears, their red lines. You have to be willing to engage, to negotiate, to deal. This wasn't about being chummy with Putin. It wasn't about admiring his leadership style or his shirtless horseback riding photos. It was about being pragmatic. It was about recognizing that Putin was the key to ending the war, and that the only way to end the war was to talk to him directly, forcefully, and with a clear understanding of American interests. This was real diplomacy, not the polite, deferential kind, where everyone pretends to agree with each other while secretly plotting behind each other's backs. This was tough diplomacy, the kind where you look your opponent in the eye, lay down your demands, and make it clear that you're not going to back down. This was diplomacy, Trump-style analysis beyond the headlines. This wasn't about appeasement, it was about engagement. It was about recognizing that diplomacy is not a sign of weakness, but a tool of strength. It was about being willing to talk to your adversaries, not because you like them, but because it's the only way to resolve conflicts peacefully. It was about cutting through the noise, the posturing, the grandstanding, and getting down to the real issues. It was, in short, about being a leader. 5.2 Concessions, the unavoidable truth, or how to swallow your pride and get the deal done. Here's where things get tricky. Here's where the experts and the armchair generals start to lose their minds. Because the truth is, in any negotiation, especially one involving a war, there are going to be concessions. There's going to be give and take. There's going to be compromise. And in the case of Ukraine, this might mean some very uncomfortable realities. It might mean Ukraine accepting a neutral status, foregoing its ambitions to join NATO. It might even mean, and this is the one that really sticks in the craw, acknowledging some territorial changes, the howls of protest from the hawks and the idealists would be deafening. They'd accuse Trump of betraying Ukraine, of rewarding Russian aggression, of abandoning our allies, but Trump, the ultimate realist, understood that sometimes you have to make difficult choices to achieve a greater good. Sometimes you have to accept a less than perfect outcome to avoid a catastrophic one. This wasn't about selling out Ukraine. It was about recognizing the reality on the ground. It was about understanding that a prolonged war, a war that could potentially escalate into a wider conflict, was in no one's interest. It was about prioritizing peace over pride, stability over symbolism. It was, to put it bluntly, about swallowing your pride and getting the deal done. It was about recognizing that a flawed peace is better than a perfect war. Analysis, the bitter pill, concessions, however unpalatable, were presented as a necessary evil, a means to an end. The justification acknowledged the potential pain and controversy involved, but framed it as a pragmatic choice, a way to avoid a worse outcome. It was about being realistic, not idealistic, about the challenges of achieving peace in a complex and messy conflict. It was about recognizing that sometimes the best deal is the one you can actually get, not the one you wish you could get. 5.3 European allies stepping up to the plate, or how to make Europe pay its fair share. Finally, Trump was never one to shy away from a fight, but he also believed in fair play, and he didn't think it was fair for the United States to bear the entire burden of defending Europe. He had been saying it for years. NATO allies needed to step up and pay their fair share. They needed to invest in their own defense, to take responsibility for their own security, and to stop relying on Uncle Sam to bail them out, and the Ukraine crisis presented the perfect opportunity to drive that point home. Trump made it clear that while the United States was willing to help, Europe needed to take the lead. They needed to provide the bulk of the financial assistance, the military aid, and the diplomatic muscle to resolve the conflict. The idea of a European-led peacekeeping force of Europe managing its own security challenges. That was exactly what Trump wanted to see. It was about empowering our allies, about creating a more balanced and sustainable security partnership. It was, in short, about making Europe great again, too, or at least making them pay their bills. Analysis, the burden-sharing blueprint. This was about shifting the responsibility for European security from the United States to Europe itself. It was about creating a more equitable and sustainable partnership, where allies pulled their weight and contributed their fair share. It was about addressing the long-standing imbalance in transatlantic relations and ensuring that the United States was not the only one footing the bill. It wasn't about abandoning Europe, it was about partnership. In conclusion, the Trumpian peace dividend. Trump's vision for a negotiated settlement in Ukraine was a bold, ambitious, and unapologetically realistic plan. It was about ending the war quickly, minimizing American involvement, and creating a more stable and secure Europe. It was about using diplomacy, economic pressure, and a healthy dose of Trumpian swagger to achieve a peace that served American interests and prevented a wider conflict. It wasn't a perfect plan. It wasn't a plan that would please everyone. But it was a plan. It was a strategy. It was a way forward. And it was, above all, a testament to Trump's unwavering belief in the art of the deal, in the power of negotiation, and in the ability of the United States to shape the world in its own image. It was about winning, not just for America, but for peace. Because, as Trump would say, a strong America is a peaceful America, and a peaceful world is a good thing, especially if America is calling the shots. Okay, let's tackle the criticisms of Trump's Ukraine policy head-on from a pro-Trump perspective, maintaining the established style Trump's Ukraine playbook, addressing the critics or how to shut down the haters and fake news. All right, so we've laid out Trump's plan, the economic smackdown, the direct diplomacy, the tough love for Ukraine, and the America First guiding principle. It's a bold, unconventional, and undeniably effective strategy for achieving peace and protecting American interests. But, of course, the critics are out in full force. The liberal media, the foreign policy establishment, the armchair generals, they're all screaming bloody murder. They're accusing Trump of everything from appeasement to treason, from abandoning our allies to cozying up to dictators. It's the same old, tired playbook, folks. They hated Trump from day one, and they'll hate anything he does, no matter how successful it is. But we're not going to let their whining and their fake news narratives go unanswered. We're going to take their criticisms head-on and show them, once again, why Trump is the master of the game. Here's how we shut down the haters, Trump style. Criticism number 1. Trump is abandoning Ukraine. This is the most common and the most predictable criticism. The media loves to portray Trump as a heartless monster who's throwing Ukraine to the wolves. They paint him as a Putin puppet, willing to sacrifice a Democratic ally for the sake of, well, they never quite explained that part. The Trumpian rebuttal. Abandoning Ukraine? Give me a break. Trump is the only one who's actually trying to save Ukraine from a long, bloody, and ultimately unwinnable war. He's the only one who's offering a realistic path to peace, a way to stop the fighting and prevent further bloodshed. It was all talk and no action. They sent them a few weapons, slapped on some weak sanctions, and then sat back and watched as Russia took bite after bite out of their territory. Trump, on the other hand, is saying enough is enough. He's using real leverage, economic pressure, direct diplomacy, to force Russia to the negotiating table and to get Ukraine a deal that will actually end the conflict. This isn't about abandoning Ukraine. It's about saving Ukraine. It's about being a true friend, not a fair-weather friend who offers empty promises and meaningless gestures. Criticism number 2. Trump is undermining international law. This is the argument of the legalistic elites, the ones who live in ivory towers and think that international relations can be governed by a set of rules written on parchment paper. They clutch their pearls and wring their hands about the sanctity of international law, as if it's some kind of holy scripture. The Trumpian rebuttal. International law. What international law? The international law that allowed Russia to annex Crimea, the international law that failed to prevent the war in Donbass, the international law that's been routinely violated by countries all over the world whenever it suits their interests. Trump understands that international law is only as good as the power that enforces it. And in the real world, power is what matters. He's not going to let some abstract legal principle prevent him from achieving a real peace, a peace that protects American interests and prevents a wider conflict. Besides, what's the alternative? To let the war drag on indefinitely? To sacrifice thousands more lives, all in the name of upholding some theoretical rule that no one actually follows. That's not just naive, it's irresponsible. Trump is a pragmatist, not a legal scholar. He's focused on results, not on process. And if that means bending a few rules to achieve a greater good, then so be it. The ends justify the means, especially when the ends are peace and stability. Criticism number 3. Trump is being too soft on Russia. This is the most ironic criticism of all. The same people who accuse Trump of being a Russian agent are now accusing him of being too lenient on Russia. They can't make up their minds. They point to the potential lifting of sanctions, the direct talks with Putin, the possibility of Ukrainian concessions, and they say, see? Trump is rewarding Russian aggression. The Trumpian rebuttal. Too soft on Russia? Are you kidding me? Trump is the only one who's actually stood up to Putin. He's the one who imposed the toughest sanctions, the one who armed Ukraine, the one who challenged Russia's expansionist ambitions. The previous administrations, they talked tough, but they did nothing. They let Putin walk all over them. They appeased him, they emboldened him, and they paved the way for the current crisis. Trump understands that the only way to deal with a bully like Putin is from a position of strength. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's using economic pressure, military deterrence, and direct diplomacy to force Russia to the negotiating table. And yes, he's willing to talk to Putin, because that's what leaders do. They talk to their adversaries. They negotiate. They try to find common ground. That's not being soft. That's being smart. And as for the potential lifting of sanctions, that's not a reward, it's an incentive. It's a way to get Russia to change its behavior. It's the carrot to go along with the stick. Trump is playing chess, while his critics are playing checkers. He's thinking 3 moves ahead. While they're stuck reacting to the headlines, he's a master strategist, and they're just a bunch of sore losers. In conclusion, the Trumpian truth bomb. The criticisms of Trump's Ukraine policy are based on misunderstandings, mischaracterizations, and outright lies. They're driven by partisan hatred, ideological blindness, and a deep-seated fear of anyone who challenges the status quo. But the truth is, Trump's approach is the only realistic path to peace in Ukraine. It's the only way to prevent a wider conflict, to protect American interests, and to create a more stable and secure world. It's not pretty, it's not perfect, and it's certainly not politically correct, but it's effective. And in the end, that's all that matters, because, as Trump would say, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. And Trump, he's a winner. He always has been, and he always will be. And he's going to win this one too. For America, for Ukraine, and for the world. Okay, let's bring it home with a powerful conclusion. Summarizing Trump's Ukraine policy and its potential, all while maintaining the established pro-Trump, light button, sightful, and distinctly Trumpian voice. Trump's Ukraine playbook, the grand finale. Or, how to make peace, make America great again, and make the haters cry. So, there you have it, folks. The complete Trump playbook for Ukraine. The economic warfare, the direct diplomacy, the tough love, the America First backbone. It's a masterpiece of strategic thinking, a symphony of power and persuasion. A testament to the art of the deal applied to the most pressing geopolitical challenge of our time. The critics, the doubters, the haters, they'll tell you it's crazy, it's reckless, it's doomed to fail. They'll cling to their outdated textbooks, their failed policies, and their wishful thinking. They'll continue to underestimate Donald J. Trump, just like they always have. But we know better. We've seen the man in action. We've seen him defy expectations, overcome obstacles, and achieve the impossible. We've seen him make America great, again, and we know he can do it again. On the world stage, a strategic vision for peace and American power, the Trump Doctrine in action. Trump's Ukraine policy isn't just about ending a war. It's about building a future. It's about creating a world where American interests are protected, where our allies are strong, and where our adversaries think twice before challenging us. It's about using all the tools at our disposal: power, diplomatic skill, military might, and, yes, even a little bit of unpredictability. To achieve our goals, it's about being smart, being strategic, and being bold. The freezing of assets and the imposition of sanctions. Those aren't just punitive measures, they're leverage. They're the keys to unlocking a negotiated settlement, to forcing Russia to the table, to making them realize that the cost of aggression is simply too high. The direct talks with Putin. That's not appeasement, it's leadership. It's about recognizing that you can't make peace with your friends. You have to make peace with your enemies. It's about being willing to engage, to negotiate, to deal. The conditional aid to Ukraine. That's not abandonment. It's tough love. It's about ensuring that American taxpayers' money is used wisely, that Ukraine is a partner in peace, not a dependent. It's about making sure that everyone is pulling their weight, and the America First framework. That's not isolationism. It's realism. It's about recognizing that the primary responsibility of the American president is to protect the American people, to advance American interests, and to make America strong. The future is bright, especially if you're American. The Trump vision for Ukraine is a vision of peace through strength. It's a vision of a world where American leadership is respected, where our allies are reliable, and where our adversaries are deterred. It's a vision of a future where America is not just great again, but greater than ever before. The critics will continue to carp, the doubters will continue to doubt, and the haters will continue to hate. But Trump, he'll just keep winning. He'll keep making deals, he'll keep defying expectations, and he'll keep making America great again. And in the end, that's all that matters. Because, as Trump himself would say, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. And with his Ukraine playbook, he's positioned America and the world for a major win. A win for peace, a win for stability, and, most importantly, a win for the United States of America. The future is bright, folks. Very bright. Especially if you're on Team Trump, because with Trump, America always comes first. And when America is strong, the world is a better place. It's that simple. All right, storytellers. That brings us to the end of our exploration into the narrative behind Trump's policy on the war in Ukraine. Whether you found it a gripping drama, a surprising comedy, or something in between, we hope you enjoyed unpacking this complex story with us. Now, before you head off to your next adventure, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you find most surprising or intriguing about this approach? Do you think it was a story with a clear protagonist and antagonist? Or was it more of a tangled web of motivations and consequences? Let us know in the comments below. We always love diving into your interpretations of the stories we tell. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of story-driven English and want to see more tales of global events, political strategies, and maybe even a few more with a touch of that signature Trump flair, then make sure you hit that like button. It really helps us keep bringing these stories to you. And don't be a lone wolf in this storytelling adventure. Share this video with anyone you think would find this narrative as fascinating or perhaps as perplexing as you did. The more storytellers we have in our community, the richer our discussions become. Finally, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Story-Driven English. We've got plenty more captivating tales waiting to be told, and we wouldn't want you to miss out on the next chapter. Thanks for joining us on this storytelling journey, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep those stories alive.